Let's bring in our military panel now. Retired Army Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt served as an Assistant Secretary of State under President George W. Bush, and retired Vice Admiral Robert Harward is a former Navy SEAL who served as Deputy Commander of U.S. Central Command. He grew up in Iran and graduated from the Tehran American School. Thank you both for being here. General, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of Iran's foreign minister saying the country is, quote, prepared for war with the United States? Should we take that threat seriously, or are they bluffing?
Oh, I don't think they're bluffing at all. Now, whether they have the capability to do it is another story entirely. But I don't believe that they're willing to go through another 12-day war scenario without some kind of response. And as you see from those charts of the maps that you put up on the screen, we've got a lot of Americans at a lot of bases pretty close to Iran. So I think we need to take that seriously. And but I think our troops are in a force protection level that they are ready for whatever the Iranians want to send their way.
Admiral, you grew up in Iran. I want to ask you about this blackout the regime has imposed. It's ominous because it's often something that happens right before the regime does something really awful that they don't want the world to see. There are reports out tonight from Iran that regime security forces are firing on protesters with live ammunition. They're shooting to kill.
That's exactly right. And I think that reinforces why Secretary Hegseth is talking to Elon Musk. We know communications and the ability to know what's going on in Iran is so powerful. That's also important for the people who are pushing the system to be able to coordinate, communicate with each other, and they don't want that to happen. On the same hand, that's an underbelly of the regime we can push. Cyber warfare, shutting down their communications, and taking other measures to ensure they cannot brutalize their people. I think those are all steps and options available to the president.
Admiral, is there something that Elon Musk can do with Starlink to override the regime jamming and cutting off the internet? And I mean, there are reports they're jamming Starlink. So how does Elon Musk get around that?
Well, that's just one option. As we've seen in Ukraine, we've come up with a lot of solutions to defeat jamming. And so that's in play. And we don't want to show our whole hands, but we got a lot of tools in the kit and options to ensure we can communicate, understand what the Iranian people are doing, and most importantly, allow them to communicate and coordinate to go after the regime. And that's what we really got to do, support the Iranian people.
General, President Trump says he wants to support the Iranian people and says that he's weighing military strikes on Iran to stop the deadly crackdown on all those protesters. How would that work? What would he strike, and would it work to stop the killing there?
Well, I'm sure Admiral Harwood has as many options as I do, but I think rather than try to look at Caracas as a option, or perhaps a 12-day war, frankly, I would look at what we did to Lebanon, what the Israelis did to Lebanon over a number of months. Look, the greatest thing that the protesters fear are the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps and other regime security forces. And just as the Israeli did, they started knocking out subsequent layers of the Hezbollah chain of command. I think one of those major options, perhaps one that I would favor, would be we start lopping off the different levels in the chain of command within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Of course, we did that once. President Trump did that once when he lopped off the head of the most important member of the Quds Force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, Soleimani. So that's one option that I think I would be recommended to the president if he asked.
Right, but General, I mean, the Israelis, actually, last June, killed many of the leaders in the Iranian government. That's part of their total humiliation, that they were seen and exposed as being unable to protect themselves from Israeli and American military strikes.
Well, that's true, but I think we're also seeing is something that President Trump is trying, which is completely different than what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is in Caracas, we've taken out the leader and we basically told the people that are remaining, you can stay. We're not going to de-Ba'athify you as we did in Iraq. We're not going to disband your military. You can stay, but you're going to be on a very tight leash. And I would hope that we don't try to completely eviscerate the entire regime, the entire theocracy. We've seen that game before, and it's not one that helps us too much.
Admiral, I just want to get your perspective as we look at these images of these protests that have been going on now for every day, every night for weeks. They're extraordinary. Having spent time yourself in Iran, you grew up there. What do you make of these images that we're seeing? We had a guest on Friday who was talking about the fact that this protest movement is being driven by such deep economic despair. Nobody across any class in Iran can afford to buy any food, can afford to buy any supplies. It is a true crisis that crosses all classes, all party, all political lines there.
Well, you're exactly right. This illustrates the power of the people. And don't forget, I was in Tehran when it fell in '79, and I was in marches like this where millions of people came to the streets of Tehran, and they called it the Million Man Marches, marching the streets, and indicated how close and on the precipice this all is. And I go back to emphasize something Mark said. The real thugs in this, the guys who are really accountable and responsible, isn't just the leadership. It's the Revolutionary Guard and their militias, the Basij. So I think there, if you were going to target anyone, those are the organizations you're going to. They're charged with protecting and securing the Islamic Revolution and exporting it. So they're the targets if we're going to do anything. But back to the Basij and the militias, those are volunteers dispersed within the people, and they're kind of the intel apparatus and responsible for a lot of the apprehensions and torture. They're going to be at risk of these crowds. So there's a lot of tools we have, and a lot of people who are at risk in this thing, not just from American strikes, but from the Iranian people, if we can help support them.
This would be extraordinary, wouldn't it, if this regime fell, if this regime toppled?
It's long overdue, Elizabeth. So let's all stand by and watch. I have to applaud the administration by having to make that policy statement that they stand behind and support the people of Iran and will not accept the brutality of the regime to oppress them any longer.
Well, the brutality is clearly going on, and obviously they wouldn't cut off the internet if they didn't have something to hide. General Mark Kimmitt, Admiral Robert Harward, great to talk to both of you. Really appreciate your expertise tonight.